Today we're going to talk about rational numbers and what a rational number is. Okay, so first thing that you need to kind of know is all of the numbers that we've been working with this year are called real numbers. Okay, there's also something called imaginary numbers. You're going to learn that later on in your math career, but all the numbers that we've worked with this year are called real numbers. Now there's two subcategories of real numbers. So if you want to draw this out in your notes, there are numbers called rational numbers and irrational numbers. Okay, so I'm going to kind of talk about what each of those are and what they include. Okay, so underneath rational numbers, there's a couple different subtypes of numbers that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about whole numbers, natural numbers, and integers. Okay, those are all types of rational numbers. So we're also going to be talking about those. Okay, so the first one that we're going to start with, we'll go ahead and just start with what a whole number is. Okay, so a whole number, and this is on your note sheet, so you can go ahead and look at that, or you can just fill this in your notes. So a whole number is a number that only has 0 as its decimal point. Okay, it also has to be positive, okay, and it includes 0. Okay, so some examples of whole numbers. 1 would be a whole number, 5 would be a whole number, 10 would be a whole number, okay, 0 is a whole number. Okay, 4.0 is a whole number because that is the same as 4. So those are whole numbers, okay, those are whole numbers. Now, the difference between that and an integer, so the next type of number is called an integer. The difference between those are integers include positive and negative numbers. Okay, so they're positive and negative, and 0, and they only have 0 for a decimal point. Okay, they only have 0 for a decimal point. So that means, for example, just again, I could have 4.0, that's an integer. That is the same as 4. I can have -8, that's an integer. -12, 7, 0. Okay, those are all integers. No decimals, no fractions. Integers are positive and negative, and they're just normal numbers, no decimals, no fractions. So those are integers. Okay, so make sure you list some integers out. Okay, the next type of number that we're going to talk about are called natural numbers. Another name for natural numbers are counting numbers. So if you think about when you first started learning how to count, if I gave you a group of something, you would start with 1. So counting numbers start at 1, okay, and go up. Okay, they are whole numbers, and they continue to increase as you go up. So counting numbers, it would start. Natural or counting numbers are like 1, 2, 3, 4. I could keep going up to 2,000. Okay, there's lots of different natural counting numbers. Again, they're whole numbers, okay, and they start at 1. Those are natural numbers. Okay, so that brings us to what rational numbers are. Okay, so a rational number includes all of those numbers we just talked about, but the definition for a rational number is a number. Okay, so a rational number is a number that can be written as a over b, where b cannot be 0. Now this means right here, where it can be written as a over b, that means it can be written as a fraction, where the bottom, where the denominator cannot be 0. Okay, I'll talk about that in a second. Rational numbers include fractions. They include decimals that terminate, which means end, like 4.0 or 4.82. Those are terminating decimals, and they include repeating decimals like 4.5 repeating, okay? So rational numbers are any number that you can write as a fraction. You could write as a terminating decimal, as a repeating decimal. Those are rational numbers. So we're gonna make a list of some different types of rational numbers. Okay, so any just normal counting numbers, 4, 5, 8, positive integers, those are rational numbers. Negative ones, -6, -10, any of those types of numbers, those are rational. Okay, any fractions, so 4/8, negative 5/12. Any number that's a fraction is a rational number. Okay, if I could write it as a fraction, it's also rational. So if I give you one like 19 divided by 7, you can write that as a fraction. That's the same as 19 over 7. So that is a rational number. Okay, other types of numbers that are rational numbers are terminating decimals. So 4.832. Okay, it ends, it stops, so it's a rational number. I could have negative 2.73. Terminating decimal, it's a rational number. Okay, repeating decimals are also rational. So negative 8.21 repeating, that would be a rational number because it repeats. Negative 2.7 repeating, that would be a rational number because it repeats. Okay, so far those are some rational numbers. Another type of rational number would be one like this. Perfect squares, we learned about square roots the other day. So the square root of 25, that equals 5. That's a nice number, so it's a rational number. The square root of 9, that also would be a rational number. Okay, you can also have fractions that look like this. You could have 0 divided by 5. That would be a rational number. It's a fraction, and you can divide by 0. Now, one that is not a rational number is one where you have 4 divided by 0. You cannot divide by 0. It's impossible to divide by 0. So this is not a rational number. You cannot divide by 0. Okay, so that's not rational. Okay, so here's a list of some different types of rational numbers. Okay, we have some decimals, we have some fractions, we have whole numbers, we have integers. These are all types of rational numbers. Okay, so make sure you have those listed. Now, if it's not rational, the name for that is an irrational number. Okay, so an irrational number, okay, those are numbers that cannot be written as a fraction. Cannot be written as a fraction. Okay, so if you need to write that down, make sure you pause. Okay, they cannot be written as a fraction. They include decimals that never end or repeat. So decimals that don't end or repeat. Okay, so those are irrational numbers. Now we're going to list some again. Okay, so again, if you need to pause the video, push pause. So here's an example of an irrational number. One of those would be pi. Now if you think about pi, that's a decimal that never ends, never repeats. So that is irrational. Okay, so that's one. Here's another example. Okay, another example would be something like 4.12, 122, 1222. Okay, and then I have some dots there. Now this decimal, it never ends. That's what these dots are for here. And it's not repeating because it says 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2. That's not repeating, that's just a pattern. So a decimal like this would be irrational. So we have pi, we have this. Dividing by 0, that's an irrational number. So 4 divided by 0. You cannot divide by 0, so that's irrational. 5 over 0. Any number over 0 divided by 0 is irrational. The other type of irrational numbers that we're going to talk about are the not perfect squares. So not the ones that work out, the not nice ones. So that'd be like the square root of 7. Okay, it doesn't work out nice. If you actually put that in on your calculator, it's going to give you a decimal that never ends and never repeats. Okay, so that's irrational, as well as maybe the square root of 13. There's lots of them that are irrational. Okay, so that is what irrational numbers are. So you should have some examples of both rational and irrational numbers. So just to test yourself out, okay, I'm going to write some numbers here. You need to decide which ones are rational. Okay, so I want you to pick out which ones you think are rational. Okay, push play when you're ready, when you have picked out which ones you think are rational. Okay, so the first one I know is rational is negative 12. That's an integer. That's rational. 4 divided by 5. That's a fraction. It's rational. Okay, now I know some that are not. This first one, 8 divided by 0. You can't divide by 0. That's irrational. That's not rational. I'm going to cross that one off. The next one, I can have 0 divided by 8 though. So this one is rational. Now pi, that's a decimal that never ends, never repeats, so that's not rational. Square root of 25, that equals 5. That's a nice one. So that one is rational. Square root of 27, that is irrational. It's not a perfect square. Okay, down here, 4.2 repeating. Repeating decimals are rational. Okay, and then the last one, 2.13, 133, 1333. Okay, that one is actually irrational, okay, because it does not repeat. I missed 1 3 there at the end. Sorry. So it does not repeat, so it is not rational. All right, so that's what rational and irrational numbers are.